Welcome to the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. I'm David Fung, an executive leadership coach and seasoned people leader. This podcast is all about helping leaders grow, navigate challenges, and build high-performing teams with real stories, insights, and strategies you can apply today. Let's dive in.
Leadership isn't about telling people anything. It's not about telling them what they must do. It's not about telling. It's actually far more about asking, trying to find out, hey, you're the one with the expertise. Bring it on. Tell me how we should approach this problem. Tell me what's your take on this.
A little bit of banter before we start our podcast, and we're recording now. So yes. Everyone, welcome back to the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. I got Marcus Van Elfen today. Hola, Marcus.
Hola.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
¿Qué tal?
I don't know if I'm speaking Spanish correctly, and I don't know if I'm speaking the right dialect even, so who knows?
Who knows anyway. I probably don't speak the proper Spanish for this region anyway.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us learn it from Duolingo, and that's South American Spanish.
Oh, is it?
Yes. It's not Spanish.
I did not know that. So Duolingo teaches South American Spanish.
Yes.
Okay. So you said you're hunkered down in Spain right now.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds very tough what you're going through.
Well, yeah.
They speak was it Catalan?
Yes, they speak Catalan in the area. I'm sorry, it's one language too many for my brains to be able to process right now.
Okay, so
I'm sticking to learning Spanish.
Okay, learning Spanish, but I presume you can get by with English, no problem over there.
Not really, no. Especially if you're in the more, well, I'm more in the not so touristic areas. Then people either speak only Catalan or Spanish.
Okay.
So but I make do.
Okay.
I've learned sufficient.
Universal tourist language, which is pointing. Like.
Yes. And showing with fingers, two of those.
I was in Russia many eons ago for a work trip, and I needed to buy a 2-way subway pass, and I only knew how to count up to 2 in Russian, and so I was just like dva.
After dva, you didn't remember what.
If there was another route, a third way there, that I'd be screwed. Anyways, well, Marcus, thank you for joining me today. Let's give everyone. I'll give it to you for 30 seconds to introduce yourself to everyone. And what do you do?
Well, I used to say as little as possible, but that's not true.
Yeah. So I tried to do that now, but it's really not working.
It just doesn't work because
it's not working at all for me.
No, it doesn't work for me either, simply because I like doing things. Doing things gives me energy.
Mm-hmm.
And my focus on where I really get my energy from has been to take my my study in psychology and apply it in the field of leadership. So that's what we call the field of leadership psychology. And that to me is something that's incredibly interesting. And it's incredibly interesting simply because I'm one of those people who always wants to make the world a better place. I'm sure you've met many of those.
Mm-hmm.
And I firmly believe that this area of leadership is maybe one of the most important areas in which we can improve people's well-being. I'm not talking only of the leader, I'm talking especially of the people the leader is leading.
Yeah.
So this whole thing of getting people to experience a higher sense of well-being really is what drives me.
So leadership psychology. So you've brought the two worlds together. You understand psychology very well. You've studied leadership over a number of years. You have a book, The Excellent Leader.
Uh-huh.
And I noticed in there you talk about observational listening.
Yes.
Sounds like a pretty important skill.
Yes.
Yeah. You want to talk a little bit more about that, like what that means and how is this related to well-being?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think that especially when you're talking about leadership, I think majority of our work in being a leadership is somehow focused on communication. So somehow the way we communicate with the people we are working with is extremely important. And I believe that well-being starts with getting proper communication going. In my study as a psychologist, one of the things that particularly interested me was communication. And what particularly interested me is some people seem to just so easy for them. They just do it. They get conversation to the right depth that doesn't seem to cost them any effort. They just do it. And you see other people who seem to battle and they don't get that much done. What my hypothesis was, and I think I've got enough evidence to support it, is that the missing element is emotion. So the people who communicate easy, they focus on what emotions are playing in the other person right now in the here and now.
Okay.
And for that, you need to observe. So here comes observational listening, observing what's going on in the other person and somehow using that information to communicate.
Okay. So observational listening.
Mm-hmm.
How is that different from traditional listening techniques people talk about, like active listening? And you've probably heard all the different ones. Like, what's different about this?
Well, let's take active listening, because in fact, observational listening uses all the active listening skills, adds a few to it, but the majority of these skills are the exact same skills. So active listening is just good. It's a really good way to listen to what another person is saying. By adding this extra layer of emotion to it, you deepen those skills. I can give you a simple example. Something we do quite often when we're having a conversation with somebody is we repeat one or two words that they've just said. And in technical terms, we call that a literal reflection. Then that's an active listening skill. So what observational listening adds to that is the choice of which word do you repeat. And the observational listening says, try and listen in what somebody's telling you to which words are loaded with an emotion.
Yeah.
Because the emotion is telling us actually that's an important word.
Yeah.
And by only dropping only that one word where the emotion is there, we're actually dropping only the important word in the sentence someone has just spoken. And that makes them feel heard to a deeper level, and they feel safer with you, which is another one of my pet subjects, psychological safety.
Yeah, safety. Yeah, it's reflection is like reflecting what you heard from someone is like I know I'm trained as a coach, and that is one of the things that you practice a lot and learn the subtleties and the nuances behind. It's not as simple as like, oh, I heard you say this word many times.
Yeah,
it's noticing the emotions behind it, and I think that comes with practice and intuition, and it becomes intuition. But then you also hear about this, like I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he's this famous ex-FBI negotiator. He talks about negotiation, and he talks about like exactly that, like reflecting that a key emotion that that the other person was talking about is it's like, hey, it sounds like X is very important to you. Can we agree on that? Get them to say yes.
Yes.
Right. And that's the start of a great negotiation. So it sounds like you've broken that down. So I guess like when you look at what you're trying to do with observational listening, with some of these tactics, technical techniques like reflection, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to change?
Well, really, maybe that fits in with what you've just said as well. Is I believe that if you want to be an excellent leader, the thing that you're really looking for is authenticity. So if you're doing something as a little trick just to influence somebody in a way that you want without taking the other person into consideration in this idea, in my terms, that's called manipulation, then I don't think this is the right way forward. So for me, it's in authenticity. So how do you actually teach people to become more aware of what works in their communication? Because really, you said it yourself, you also use these techniques already. So you use these techniques in your coaching practice. I'm not teaching anybody anything new. I'm just making them more aware of exactly what they're doing, fine-tuning that, and allowing that to become part of their natural way of dealing with other people. And when you do that, you are authentic. You create a space which is psychologically safe, where other people feel heard, they feel safe, they feel they're allowed to express what's going on in them. And to me, then you get far more meaningful conversations coming.
Yeah. What's I'm always curious, like what's an example of an effective communication or effective conversation that you've observed or you've had with observational listening and such?
Well, I think I see both sides of the story. So I sometimes see when it goes well, and I sometimes see when you think, oh dear.
Let's start with the oh dear. That sounds like that's more loaded. See, you see
Well,
what I did there? You saw
it
what I
can be
did there, right?
it can be very simple. It can be very simple. I was speaking with a client earlier on today, and she was telling me how they just gave her a pay rise, and it was a rather disappointing pay rise. And the reason they gave her for the very minimal pay rise, I can't believe I'm going to repeat this, but they said to her, because you don't add sufficient value to our company.
Okay. That is loaded.
That's loaded. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's painful. So if that's really true, should they be having this conversation?
Well, if someone doesn't add value to the company,
what are they doing there?
I'd go back to that person and say, okay, then what am I doing here? Right. And so that's very interesting.
Understand, I'm saying this is somewhere where I believe somebody hasn't got sufficient empathy to realize, if I bring the message in this way to a subordinate in this case, what effect is that going to have on this person?
Yeah. Well, you walk away with more questions than answers in that situation. Whereas, like, it might hurt initially, but coming with solid examples here and areas of improvement, areas where, they've been coached and haven't been effective, whatever it might be, right? And areas of opportunity. That's just kind of leadership 101 right there. That sounds like.
Yeah, and choosing the correct conversation for that. Let's be honest, this should be done in kind of a performance review or a regular check-in on how we're doing,
It should be discussed when it happens, honestly.
Exactly. Not
364 days later. Yeah.
Huh. So all kinds of reasons why I think, oh, ouch. This could have been done differently and it would have had less negative effect on the person involved, who now feels like the company's not being loyal to her. So why should she be loyal to the company? So who's winning out of this one?
I don't think anyone wins here. You got a disgruntled employee who's like, all right. Okay, I've been busting my butt, or at least I think I am, and clearly you don't appreciate it.
Exactly. So the next best person who comes along and offers me a job, I'm gone.
Yeah. Yep. Maybe that was the intended effect. Manipulation, though, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's manipulation. I believe that a lot of people aren't aware of what they're doing. A lot of people are reacting on the autopilot, which generally is okay to do. I mean, if we have to think about everything we do, we'd go absolutely crazy. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to important things, that's when I think it becomes really important to just put out those feelers a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. That is very interesting. I always find it interesting where there's a lot of rhetoric around, oh yeah, my people are the most important asset in the company. I need you to treat your people well, so they treat the customers well, blah, 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 right?
All true.
And it's absolutely true, right? But, speaking of reflecting, there's also things called parroting. You could parrot what someone else is saying and not understand or really care what it means. So if we're looking at it a little more pessimistically, let's go to the other side. Where have you seen it done well? Observational listening. Empathy.
Yeah, when I see it being done well, you just notice how people dare to be themselves and dare also to offer from their expertise what's actually necessary to know. I mean, if we're talking about why do you hire somebody in the first place, you're not hiring somebody to do a job. You're hiring somebody because they have particular expertise that you don't have. So if you have a lot of people in your team who all have different expertise, which is almost by definition true, what you want is these people to add their expertise to whatever it is the team is doing. If you don't feel safe, you're not going to add your comments.
Yeah.
then you're going to get bad decisions being made.
Yeah.
So it's already there where people are allowed and in fact invited to be critical. They're invited to show dissent in a respectful way.
Yeah.
But the questions of, hey, we're talking about this and this idea. Let's just play devil's advocate. Tell me what can go wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, what are we missing? What aren't we seeing? All these kind of questions in a safe space. That brings up innovative nature out of people to create better solutions.
It's such a simple thing to do. And like, look, I've been on the receiving end of those environments where, folks are like, oh, why don't you speak up? And you're like, well, whenever people speak up, like you observe what's happening around you. You're like, there's consequences here.
Exactly.
Right? Whether you verbalize it or not, and whether you're outright about it or not, you're like, no, there's a lot of freaking consequences in some of these political environments. That's why I'm like, why do you think that person's not speaking up? And like, because they see the shit that happens.
It's a no-brainer, isn't it?
It's a no-brainer. Like, well, I want people to speak up. I'm like, well, maybe you need to prompt as a leader, prompt the people and to get that out of them and show what you do with that information.
Exactly.
It's your actions, not your intention, right? Exactly. Intentions are great, but your actions, like, hey, Marcus, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Like, where could things go wrong here? And then be curious about some of the points. Be genuinely curious. But when it's like, okay, where can we go wrong? Okay, cool. Oh, thanks, Marcus. Okay.
And do nothing with it. Yeah.
And do nothing with it.
Not being disregarded.
Or criticized immediately.
Or defense. Or
defensive about it.
Oh, no, that's not true for this case.
Yeah. You're like, all right, I guess I'll just shut up, right? And so now we're all guilty of doing that at some point. I'm sure I am. Sure. I've done it. I admit it. And as much as I'm being as conscious not to do it. So, but given that, like, when you think of like some of the common pitfalls that leaders face to implementing this framework you have around observational listening, what do you see as common pitfalls and obstacles for leaders to implement this?
Might be strange to say it, but I believe that a lot of what we do automatically without sufficient thinking about what the effect of that is. And again, you don't want to think about everything, but especially the important stuff. Reflecting is a skill that's necessary. I believe that the pitfall is that we usually fall back into old patterns. That's our default. So getting ourselves to change our default is probably the largest challenge we're faced with. I have the same, I'll take a simple example, the why question. We love the why question. We love to ask, well, why this and this and this? Why this and this and this? Whereas when we philosophically think about it, the answer we can usually do absolutely nothing with. Or at best, we can use it as an excuse. Why am I feeling angry? Okay, let's get an answer to that. And now? So this is an example of something that once you become aware of it, you can change your thinking and your language into more saying, okay, the why question is exceedingly interesting when we have to analyze something technical that's happened in the past. Okay, as soon as we talk about human beings, we're not talking about robots anymore. The why question in the past generally is only to excuse ourselves. So it has no real value. It would be better to ask the question, what is this trying to tell me? What is this trying to push me to? How are we going to deal with this in the future? Where is this nudging us towards? All these kind of questions are far more interesting because they're future-oriented and action-oriented.
Yeah.
Having said this, I know this, and I still notice that as soon as I'm slightly under pressure, I default into asking the why question.
Yeah. There's something about the why question. We ask why and I've seen articles about this too, like scientific articles about this. It almost brings a person into defense mode.
Definitely, especially if it's a why about someone's behavior.
Yeah. So why did you do that? It becomes defense, or if you're talking to yourself, like, why am I like this? And then you start excusing yourself, like, well, I was treated badly as a kid, and I was bullied, and my mom and dad and.
And that's really going to help you.
it's so on one hand, it's good to acknowledge how you were treated or whatnot, but it does not excuse your present and future behavior. And I think that's the difference there. So,
And perhaps the question is, why should you excuse something in the first place?
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
mean, what's happened in the past has happened in the past.
Yeah, yeah. It's and I think that's the thing that coaching teaches you too is and how to teach yourself is using that is what is this telling you? How can I use this as a fuel to achieve or do the things I want to do? Right. Now, you're a psychologist, so I don't want to. I don't want to minimize the need to understand the past. Right. There is some understanding and unpacking some people need to do.
Also, psychologists differ on that one, eh?
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me more.
The old school psychologists, they're interested in your past and your childhood.
Yeah.
So the new school psychologists aren't, because there is sufficient research that shows you that there's not much point in rehashing the past unless the past is hassling you right now.
Yeah.
Which
so probably is.
Yeah. So if it is hassling you right now, then that might be a reason to go and discover something in what's happened.
Yeah.
But in general, it's and this is also the basis of the positive psychology. The basis is, okay, let's rather look what's going well, what could go better, and how are we going to do that?
Yeah.
And to me, that fits very well with leadership psychology. If we are constantly asking people why they did what they did, we're again creating the space where people are being taught be defensive. In other words, it's not a safe space. Therefore, they're not going to open their mouths when they should be. I don't believe that's good for your organization in the long term.
Yeah.
The opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's also value to it. So, you just sparked another thing. Like they teach you in leadership is, especially when you're going through change, I feel, a transition, transformation, change of strategy. It's like whiplash to the individuals, and you got to explain what's happening, what's the macroscopic view, what's the microscopic view, why were you making this change, and then the why, right? And then why.
This is a different kind of a why question. This is a why directed at the future.
It is why directed at the future, but it always comes back, Marcus, to what's in it for me.
Yeah.
It's like, and especially if you're part of a bigger organization. Okay. Hey, we had to lay off X number of people. I lived this, by the way, a few years ago. And the reason why was XYZ, right? And I added my own flavor to it because I go, look, here's what was happening in the macroscopic world, things you don't hear in the PR. I'm not telling you anything that's private, but here's all the things happening. And honestly, put yourself in those shoes. Like, what would you do? I'd probably do the same thing, right? And so people are still wondering now, okay, so what's this change? What's in it for me? It looks like I could be next. And it's almost like you have to help people understand, you got to put yourself in,
in their shoes
and understand the strategic change and why it's happening and how it actually could benefit them in the future. So that's very hard. That's a very tough thing to do, especially with human emotions. But my whole point here is that if you are trained on your own positive psychology, if you are trained on positive psychology, you are aware of positive psychology, you can get through those things faster because you're more forward looking.
Yeah, maybe that's also.
You disagree.
Well, I agree and I disagree. This is always the beauty. Sometimes we move through things too fast. And then that, I mean, is we don't take into account human nature. I mean, we need time for things to land and to process before they really become a part of us. And if you take it on the macro level, that's even worse. A simple example, it's been proven as long ago as 1820 scientifically that punishment is the least effective way to change people's behavior.
Shucks, I better change the way I do things.
But you understand what I'm saying? It's more than 200 years ago. What have we learned from this message? So, and okay, this is macroscopic, but also microscopic. So if you take the individuals also need time for things to process, for things to land. And perhaps that's the other interesting side and that's, I attach this again to leadership. Leadership isn't about telling people anything. It's not about telling them what they must do. It's not about telling. It's actually far more about asking. We're trying to find out, hey, you're the one with the expertise. Bring it on. Tell me how we should approach this problem. Tell me what's your take on this. Tell me what motivates you, because I'm not going to motivate you. You're already coming to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, understood. There's so much change right now that, I think we, as we're speaking right now, by the way, I try not to get myself all wrapped into I think it's garbage, rhetoric, all the things that go on. But, as you think about how our world is shaping up right now, from your point of view,
sure,
as a European as well, and I guess where could people in the world, anywhere in the world right now, benefit from some of the frameworks and principles that you teach right now?
Well, I believe that most people, by far the most people on this planet, are good people, are good at heart. They want the best. They want the best for themselves. They want the best for people around them. They don't have an evil bone in their body, to put it that way. I believe that's the majority of people. So I tend not to look too much at politics and countries and things at that scale, because again, one of the failings of democracy, as far as I'm concerned, is we have a window of 4 years, which means that anything we do is based on a reasonably short term, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the things we would prefer is things that are sustainable in the long term. And this is also where the subject of corporate social responsibility is all about. It's saying, if you want to exist as a company or as an organization in 20 years' time, you need to do something that's sustainable. Because if it's not sustainable, you're not going to last. Simple as that. It's not rocket science. So thinking from this point of view, looking after the people who work for you is the most simple way of ensuring sustainability. If you ensure sustainability on the small scale, it also impacts on the larger scale. And I'm not so much interested in that larger scale. I'm just saying, if more people can come home after a day of work and feel satisfied, feel happy, I'm happy. Then I've done something. And so really, I'm not so worried about the big ideas. I say every challenge we're faced with, whether it is nationwide, whether it is on our planet, whether it is in our community, every challenge also provides opportunity. So how do we find the opportunities and utilize those opportunities and grant the people who work for us the space in which to be innovative around those opportunities in a safe way? I think we will, by nature, make people who are more curious, more interested in what they're doing, and happier. I don't think it's difficult.
It's simple. Like when it comes down
but
to
not easy is actually the words I use most often.
Yeah, it is. And you are absolutely correct. The human nature, ego, all the vices of humans, those will always play a factor. But I guess, like, from everything you learn then over the years, I ask everyone this question. If you had to go back to the 20-year-old Marcus and give him 2 or 3 pieces of advice, and you only had 30 seconds to give him that advice, what would you say to him?
Well, maybe I should give some context first. I didn't start as a psychologist. I started as an electrical and electronic engineer.
Yep.
With that as context, the thing I would say to the 20-year-old Marcus is stop listening to what other people are trying to convince you to do and find out what you really want to do and go for it. Just doing something just because you're good at it and it doesn't give you the sufficient pleasure, you don't have sufficient interest for it. It doesn't wake you up every morning and say, yes, let's go. I don't know. I believe that is something that I would have taught myself, and I would have probably done something more with actually human nature rather than with the nature of electrons and protons, all those kind of things. They're a lot more predictable than humans. Let me put it to you that way.
Yep. Electronics, code, all that.
Exactly. I've done software engineering as well. It's predictable.
It's more predictable than humans. They listen to you.
Sure.
Maybe not for long when they become autonomous. So we'll see. That's another conversation for another day.
Yeah, we could talk about a lot of subjects.
That subject has come up a lot on this podcast. Was just the autonomous nature of, when we actually reach AGI, artificial general intelligence. What would that mean? What could that be? Could it truly replace a human? I don't think
maybe it can. But I look at AI and I think, it's technology. Yes, we use technology. If we didn't want to use technology, then you wouldn't have electricity in your house. Let's be quite honest.
Yeah.
So technology is there to help us. Technology is there to assist us. So where AI can assist us, yes, please. But I think what gets us going, what gets us alive and energized is making our own challenges and having the faith that whatever the challenge is that we're faced with, we will find the energy to take that challenge on.
Okay. Well, with that, one last question, Marcus, I ask everyone. What's one question I haven't asked you, but I should have?
Well, that's a difficult one because I get the feeling that our conversation has been a very meaningful one. Mm-hmm. So, again, there are so many subjects we could have spoken about. I don't believe that you've missed something.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're coming out with that feeling. Well, Marcus, if our listeners need to find you, where can they find you? And also, what are you up to next?
Well, they can find me via my website. The website that I'm trying to push the most is excellent-leader.com, simply because that's where they can find links to my books, they can find links to me, and they can find links to my training courses. And the training courses I'm developing are especially to not only get people to read a book and change their awareness, but actually practice the skills that fit with that awareness. And I'm working with several people across the globe to try and make more languages available. Right now, English is the primary language to get available. And after that, we're looking also into bringing a Turkish version out. There's a Dutch version out.
Okay.
One day, a Spanish version. So, yeah.
For now, enjoy their wine and their food.
Exactly.
Well, Marcus, it's been a good time spending with you here. Thank you very much for making the time today and sharing your knowledge with me and challenging me, and as well as giving this beautiful insight to our listeners. So, Marcus, have a good day.
Thank you for having me, especially.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, look, Marcus, have a good day. We'll be in contact soon.
Yes, have a lovely day.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. I'm David Fung, and my mission is to help leaders grow, lead with impact, and build thriving teams. If you found this valuable, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow leader. Until next time, keep leading with purpose.